Have you ever loaded into a game of Dead by Daylight and heard that creepy static and thought, oh no, it's Sadako, only to realize 5 minutes later that she hasn't actually done anything yet? She's silent, she's unsettling, she crawls out of televisions like a nightmare straight out of some J-horror history book, and yet almost nobody plays her. Yeah, it's the Onryo. And why is that? Welcome back to Forgotten Foes of the Fog, the series where we take Dead by Daylight's most overlooked killers and ask one simple question: why did they disappear from the meta? Today, we're talking about one of the game's most iconic licensed killers, Sadako Yamamura, better known as the Onryo. Introduced in Chapter 23, Sadako Rising, the Onryo brought one of horror's most famous ghosts into the fog. She's designed around stealth, map traversal, and one unique win condition, also known as her power, Condemned. Sadako can teleport between televisions scattered across the map and lurk around being a creepy little ghost, all in while building Condemned on survivors in the process. At max Condemned, survivors can find themselves in a very tricky situation with an instant Mori. There are no hook requirements, no previous game requirements, all that's required is good gameplay. The other side to her power is demanifestation. Demanifestation is when you become intangible and you remove her terror radius and phase in and out of visibility. However, it is a great power in theory, but because she's meant to be a stealth killer, in practice, that fantasy can fall apart very, very quickly. Firstly, she has a very weak stealth, however, her whole design is around stealth. There's no two ways about it, Sadako is meant to be a stealth killer, but her stealth is one of the weakest parts of her kit. When demanifested, she flickers in and out of visibility and she can be seen by the survivors. The only problem is that that visibility of the flickering can be seen a lot further than you would expect when you're playing Sadako. Guild survivors don't get jump scared, they get pure information from this mechanic. They see you come in and it sets them up for a pre-run and the straight path to the next loop before you're even there. Their strategy is thought out and executed straight away. Yes, there are potential for mind games. It's very easy to bait pallet stuns and fake manifestations as Onryo. However, they're very unreliable and highly skilled survivors can see it coming a mile off. So it's very dependent on the skill and knowledge of your survivors. She doesn't have true stealth like Ghostface, Myers, or even Pig. She's very predictable, and predictability just kills that fear from the off. Secondly, she's got very poor chase and very poor anti-loot potential. Once your chase actually starts on Sadako, things can get worse quickly. Sadako has no consistent anti-loop in her base kit. Think about it, there's no Vault Denial, there's no loop breakers, there's no speed boost. The chase pressure is very minimal, and it all relies on the actual play of survivors. At very strong tiles, she can be forced into pure M1 gameplay. Yes, you can rely on your mind games, but it's more on survivors making mistakes rather than her actual base kit or her power and tools. Against experienced survivors, those mind games can be a lot harder, and those chases can be a lot longer, so it feels like there's very little payoff. Sure, she's got some great add-ons that can really help her because some are genuinely strong. However, when you're a killer that only feels good with specific add-ons, it's a little bit of a red flag. So the results, it's inconsistent matches where success depends less on your skill as a Sadako player and more on whether survivors make mistakes. Thirdly, her power is simple, but it has very low-risk counterplay. Sadako's power is her biggest threat. It's her insurance policy, and it's her way of knowing that she has something in her back pocket should the game go awry. So it's therefore her biggest threat, but it's also her biggest downfall. The counterplay to Condemned is extremely straightforward. How do you actually stop Condemned from happening as Survivor? Well, you grab a tape from a telly, you run across the map, you turn off the TV by putting the tape in, and then your Condemned status has pretty much gone. So any pressure that you built up throughout the whole of the trial has now just been reset by a very simple mechanic. There's no tricky time elements, no minigames, there's no real risk or any kind of meaningful trade-off from Sadako. So long as you're putting the pressure on survivors, which, as we've already discussed, is hard, then the playoff is just uncertain at best. Also, don't forget, making that even worse, when survivors turn off TVs, it doesn't just reduce their condemned status, it also removes her map pressure entirely. Sadako relies on the televisions to actually move around the map a lot more quickly with her traversal powers. So when survivors are trying to remove the condemned status, they are also stopping her from actually moving around. And it can be very, very beneficial for survivors, not so much for Sadako. And maybe you're thinking, okay, if I'm in a strong chase and I'm not really getting any kind of ground, I can teleport to the tellies mid-chase, right? Well, yeah, you can, but it's rarely worth it. The sound notification is loud, the TVs are often in terrible positions, and more often than not, it just hands survivors a lot more distance. Her main mechanic is both easy to counter and actively weakens her pressure. That just feels like there's a little bit of an off-balance in terms of Sadako. Lastly, if you remove the TVs, you remove the killer. This is the biggest problem with Sadako. If survivors understand Sadako and how to play against her, they don't just counter her, they completely delete her power. When survivors turn off the TVs, yes, they manage the condemned status, and suddenly they are no longer facing a stealth killer that is a lot scarier on paper than she is in practice. The map control is gone, and she turns into a flickering M1 killer that isn't really that strong of a power. Comparing Sadako to the likes of Plague, there's a very similar mechanic. However, at least with Plague, survivors denying you your power makes them a broken status effect. We don't get that with Sadako. Once her TVs are gone, Sadako's main kit becomes painfully basic, and good teams know it and they capitalize on it to make it a win or a very, very short trial. As always, we wrap up the episodes looking at whether she is actually a bad killer and if she is unplayable. And the answer, no. In the right hands, with the right add-ons, she can snowball games hard. Condemned kills do happen, and when they do, they're terrifying. If you put on enough pressure as Sadako, survivors can forget about Condemned before it's too late. But she's very high effort and very low consistency. That can be a very tough sell for killer players. She asks for far more than she gives back, and that is why we see her in the lower pick rates of the roster. So, is Onryo a misunderstood horror icon, or just another victim of Dead by Daylight's evolving meta? Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and next time, we'll be wrapping up Forgotten Foes of the Fog for its very first season, as we rank these killers as to whether they are truly forgotten, or whether they're just simply misunderstood. Thank you so much for watching this video to the end. I truly appreciate everyone's support on this little mini-series. If you've enjoyed it, make sure you give it a big thumbs up and make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can catch future videos before anybody else. Until next time, I will see you then.